The emperor who vanished, Rome's greatest deception. What if I told you that one of the most powerful men in the ancient world, a Roman emperor who commanded legions, who held the fate of millions in his hands, staged his own death, walked away from the throne, and disappeared into the countryside to live as a common farmer for 20 years? What if I told you that the funeral Rome mourned over was a lie? The body in the imperial tomb was not his, and the man the empire believed was dead was quietly growing cabbages in a village on the Dalmatian coast. This is not fiction. This is not myth. This is the story of Diocletian, and for centuries this was hidden from the world. Welcome back to Historical Secrets. Today we pull back the curtain on one of history's most extraordinary disappearing acts. To understand what happened, you need to understand who Diocletian was. Born around 244 AD to a family of absolutely no distinction in the Roman province of Dalmatia, he rose through the ranks of the military with a ruthlessness and intelligence that terrified everyone around him. By the year 284, he had clawed his way to the ultimate seat of power. He became Emperor of Rome, and he didn't just rule, he transformed the empire. Diocletian split Roman governance into the Tetrarchy, a system of 4 co-emperors designed to prevent the chaos and assassination that had plagued Rome for generations. He reformed the military, restructured the economy, and launched one of the most brutal persecutions of Christians the ancient world had ever seen. This was not a gentleman. This was a man of iron and blood, and every decision he made was calculated to preserve power at all costs. So when, on May 1st, 305 AD, Diocletian did something no Roman emperor had ever voluntarily done before, the ancient world was stunned into silence. He abdicated. He simply walked away from absolute power. He removed his imperial purple cloak, handed it to his successor, and left. But here is where the story takes a turn that what historians don't tell you is far stranger than the official narrative suggests. The public story is clean. Diocletian retired to his enormous palace in Split, modern-day Croatia, and lived out his days in peace, tending to his gardens. Ancient sources, particularly Lactantius and later the historian Aurelius Victor, tell us he grew vegetables and famously told visitors who begged him to return to power that if they could see the cabbages he had grown with his own hands, they would never ask such a thing again. A charming story, a quaint ending for a tyrant. But the truth was buried for a reason. You see, the circumstances surrounding Diocletian's abdication and subsequent life don't add up when you examine them closely. Several ancient sources hint that Diocletian's departure was not voluntary. The co-emperor Galerius, his former subordinate, had grown powerful, ambitious, and openly hostile. There are accounts suggesting Galerius threatened Diocletian directly, that the abdication was made under duress, under the very real threat of assassination. If Diocletian didn't leave willingly, then the peaceful retirement story is a fabrication. And here is where it gets darker. After the abdication, Diocletian was supposed to be living in his grand palace in Split, but multiple ancient sources describe him as being almost unreachable, invisible, cut off from the political world entirely. His wife Prisca and daughter Valeria were later hunted, persecuted, and executed by the very political system Diocletian had created. If Diocletian was truly sitting in a palace just across the Adriatic, why didn't he intervene? Why didn't he use his still considerable influence to protect his own family, unless he wasn't there at all? There is a lesser-known tradition, preserved in fragments of Byzantine chronicles and regional Dalmatian folklore, that suggests Diocletian did not remain in his palace after the first few years. These accounts describe the former emperor leaving his grand residence, disguising himself, and retreating into the rural villages of the Dalmatian interior. Not as a retired ruler, as a peasant, a nobody, a man who had held the world in his fist, choosing to become invisible. The evidence is circumstantial, but it is compelling. Archaeological surveys of the Split Palace show that large portions of the residential complex were repurposed remarkably early, some sections showing signs of being converted into military and administrative use within just a few years of Diocletian's supposed arrival. If the emperor was living there, why was his home being dismantled around him? Furthermore, The exact date and circumstances of Diocletian's death in 311 or 312 AD remain suspiciously vague. No ancient source gives a confident account. Some say he starved himself. Some say he was poisoned. Some say he simply faded away. The conflicting reports have a pattern that historians recognize, the same pattern you find when the truth about a powerful figure's end has been deliberately obscured. This changes everything we thought we knew about the fall of the Tetrarchy and the transition of Roman power. Consider the political landscape. After Diocletian's abdication, the empire descended into a vicious civil war. Constantine, Maxentius, Licinius, and Galerius all fought for supremacy. In that chaos, a living Diocletian was a threat to every single one of them. His continued existence meant legitimacy that could be wielded like a weapon. Any faction could claim his endorsement. Any faction could use him as a puppet. The safest thing for the new rulers of Rome was for Diocletian to be dead, or at the very least, for the world to believe he was. So what if Diocletian understood this? What if the man who had spent his entire life calculating power and survival made one final calculation? He knew that being a retired emperor was a death sentence. History had proven it. Emperor after emperor had been dragged from retirement and murdered. So he let Rome believe what it needed to believe. He let the palace become a monument to a man who was already gone. And he vanished into the hillsides of Dalmatia, into a life so ordinary that no assassin would ever think to look. For 20 years, give or take the margins of historical uncertainty, Diocletian may have lived in complete anonymity. The most powerful man in the Western world, pulling weeds from a garden not because it was a charming retirement hobby, but because it was the only disguise that could keep him alive. The cabbage story takes on an entirely different meaning when you hear it this way. When those envoys found him and begged him to return, his response was not the casual wit of a contented retiree. It was the desperate deflection of a man in hiding. "Leave me alone, I am no one. Look at my cabbages, there is nothing for you here." And the most haunting part? It may have worked. If Diocletian truly did live out his remaining years as a peasant farmer, then he accomplished something almost no one in Roman history ever managed. He escaped. He beat the system he built. He died, whenever he actually died, on his own terms. The Dalmatian coast still holds its secrets. The palace in Split, now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, draws tourists who walk through its ancient corridors without ever knowing that the man who built it may have abandoned it almost as soon as it was finished. The villages in the surrounding hills carry folk traditions of a strange old man, a foreigner of unusual bearing, who lived among them generations ago, and spoke of Rome as if he had seen it with his own eyes. For centuries, we have told the story of Diocletian as a simple tale of an emperor who retired. But history is never that simple, and the truth, when you dig deep enough, is always stranger and darker than what appears on the surface. Now, if you think this mystery was buried deep, wait until you hear what we have uncovered for next week. We are going inside the Vatican archives to explore a letter that was sealed for over 500 years. A letter that may rewrite our understanding of one of the most famous events in European history. You do not want to miss that one. If this story made you question what you thought you knew, subscribe to Historical Secrets right now and ring that notification bell. History has more secrets than it has pages, and we are just getting started.